Hello again, everybody. Diamond Jims here. Welcome back to the channel. It's been a while. Hope everybody had a nice Thanksgiving. Me and my family did. We spent it up in Chicago at my daughter's house. She was the person I stayed with when we all went to the National last year. She lives about 20 minutes away from the Stevens Center. In fact, we were driving around one day to a outlet mall and drove right past the Stevens Center, which reminded me of the fact that it's only a short 8 months away, now even shorter, to the Nationals. So get your tickets now. Anyway, yesterday you might have seen where, or last night, Indiana University won a somewhat important football game, which makes them the #1 team in the country. And in my 70 years on this earth, up until last year, I never thought that was possible. And anyway, later on in the proceedings today, I'm going to show you a piece of memorabilia I have from the 1967 team. And as you might have heard last night, they talked about the 1945 team being the last time Indiana was the undisputed champ of the Big Ten Conference, and in 1967, where they shared it with two other teams, but went to the Rose Bowl. In 1945, the Big Ten did not allow any of its schools to go to a postseason bowl game. And Indiana won the conference in 1945. And the next year, the Big Ten signs a contract with what would later become the Pac-8, the Pac-10, the Pac-12, and now the Pac-2, I guess. So anyway, they signed the contract in 1946, and Indiana did not go to the Rose Bowl in 45 and didn't go to the Rose Bowl in 1967. In 1967, Indiana tied with two other teams at 6-1 in the conference, and only played 7 conference games at the time. And 3 teams were 6-1: Purdue, Indiana, and Minnesota. Purdue was beaten by Indiana, and so there's a tiebreaker. And Purdue went to the Rose Bowl the year before and beat USC. And so at the time, for about a decade, early 60s to early 70s, the Big Ten had a rule that you couldn't go to the Rose Bowl twice. I think Minnesota went in 61 and 62, and after that they had a rule where you couldn't go twice in a row. So, high button shoes and buggy whips in the Big Ten at the time, I guess. They just weren't with the times. Anyway, so like I said, 1967, 3 teams tied for the Big Ten championship: Indiana, Purdue, and Minnesota, all 6-1. Indiana beat Purdue, so Purdue's out if you use head-to-head. So keeping that in mind, Miami fans, head-to-head may be the best tiebreaker ever devised, but it does not mean you have to use it all the time. Minnesota beat IU in the 1967 season by 26 points. Minnesota beat IU, IU beat Purdue. IU goes to the Rose Bowl because the powers that be in the Big Ten decided that since IU hadn't been before and Minnesota went 2 years in a row in the early 60s, send IU, give everybody a chance. So they sent IU out there, and they were a conference champion, and they lost to USC 14-3 on 1/1/68. To that end, the aforementioned piece of memorabilia I want to talk about as far as IU is concerned is the 1968 Rose Bowl program. See, it's the Rose Bowl because there's a big rose on it. And there it is, Indiana versus Southern California, basically 1/1 1968. Live and in color on NBC, as they used to say. There's the, pulling back, there's the Rose Bowl picture, cover. Anyway, see some pictures of these fellows. As you can see, here's as far as the Trojans are concerned, you might have heard of that fellow, this fellow underneath my finger right there. Went on to win USC's second Heisman Trophy in their history, second of 8. And IU had 4 guys that you can remember. If you've lived in Indiana and been a sports fan, as long as I have, you remember who these guys were. You might not have been an IU fan, but you knew who these guys were. Show you a couple of these guys. Here's a fellow by the name of Jade Butcher. Hope you can see him. Let me stand up. Jade Butcher is right here by my finger. Jade Butcher was a leading receiver on the team. And down here is Terry Cole, right there in the middle of your screen. He was the second leading rusher on the team. And 2 other guys that you would remember if you lived in Indiana. On the top row here is the leading rusher on the team, John Eisenbarger. And over here in the corner was quarterback Harry Gonzo. Harry Gonzo, right there. Quarterback Harry Gonzo. So, sad part about this is that Terry Cole died in 2025, and even sadder, Jade Butcher and John Eisenbarger died in the spring of 2024. So they were so close to seeing what transpired for IU football in the last 2 years, but no such luck. But Mr. Gonzo, according to my crack intelligence and research, is still with us, thankfully, at the age of, I believe, 77. So here's to Mr. Gonzo. So he has seen the last 2 years of Indiana football, and hope he enjoyed every bit of it. The joke here now in Indiana is, are we a football school and not a basketball school? And another, which happens first? Will Indiana win the national championship in football before Purdue wins the national championship in basketball? Neither team has any. So the next one that happens is their first. But which happens first, IU in football or Purdue in basketball? I will say this about my Purdue brethren. First person on the moon and the last person to leave the surface of the moon, both Purdue people. So there you go. And speaking of college football, I don't think all the sports have gone through a lot of changes since I was in high school. I started high school in 1969. All sports have gone through change since then. But I don't think you can make the argument that the sport that has gone through the most change in that time is college football. And the way I bring that up is I use the 1969 game between Texas and Arkansas. First of all, those 2 teams were not in the SEC at the time. There was a conference called the Southwestern Conference. It was, I believe, 7 schools in the state of Texas and Arkansas. And I think Texas and Arkansas were supposed to play early on in the season. Like early, mid-October, something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but they were going to meet early in the season. The powers that be in college football knew that these 2 teams were blockbusters. They were going to murder everybody. So they changed the schedule to where they played on the first Saturday in December. And of course, they went undefeated, met each other undefeated in, I believe, Fayetteville. And Texas won the game. And another way college football has changed is that both those teams, 1969, Jackie Robinson got into baseball 22 years earlier. I believe both those teams were still segregated. I still think they were. I'm not exactly sure, but I still think they were. So that's 22 years after Jackie Robinson. So society-wise, as you can see, college football has undergone a lot of changes. Anyway, another change is that at the end of that game, Texas had a bowl game to play, and I'm pretty sure Arkansas probably went to something like the Bluebonnet Bowl, which doesn't exist anymore. But Richard Nixon, the president at that time, gave the national championship trophy to Texas, and they still had a bowl game to play, I believe against Notre Dame. At the time, there were two major wire services that ranked the teams. One used the bowl games and the other didn't. So the other considered the bowl games an exhibition game at the time. So, and you could be 50 years old and still not know about this kind of thing. And you would watch the bowl games on January 1st because you had to watch each game, because this domino would fall, this domino would not fall. You would not figure out the national champion on the field. Yes, there were probably college basketball teams at the time that were segregated, but they had a tournament. They figured out a champion on the court. And college football didn't, because the bowl games had such a control over how things were figured out. But anyway, times change, and the Big Ten finally, 72, I think, got rid of the rule to where you couldn't go to the Rose Bowl 2 years in a row. And so they got rid of that. So they got rid of the high button shoes and buggy whips, so to speak. And they allowed anybody to go. The conference champion went, no matter what. So anyway, God, that's about it. Hope you enjoy this. Hope you like my little history lesson, such as it is. And stay tuned for the next video. I hope coming up soon. Might be a player profile, and or as I like to call it, a player spotlight. So hang in there. Enjoy all the football the rest of the day today. Enjoy the college football pairing show. They'll have the final 12 for sure coming up in about 30 minutes. So we'll see you soon. So long for just a while.